He's like, you need to understand that you will not have time and it will be very difficult for you to prioritize your family. They also knew that I was holding them to a much higher standard than we've ever done. And we managed to pull it together, and it was tough. The owner is on the phone with you, and he wants to talk to you.
Jesus.
And I was like, wait, I'm in my underwear. It's 5 a.m. And I was like, you really want to talk now?
Welcome back to the ChefJKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have the absolute honor of having the multi-award winning chef, Kelvin Cheung. Kelvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, first line of attack. Can you please tell me your first or favorite ever childhood food memory?
One of my earliest memories was obviously in my father's restaurants. I grew up in a very atypical kind of Chinese restaurant family. So the entire family went to work. And when my brother and I was 4, my brother was 6, my parents were at the restaurant every day. And there was no babysitters back then. There was no nannies back then. We couldn't afford it. We were just trying to struggle and push and make the restaurant happen. So in essence, the most basic way of babysitting and childcare was putting us to work. So even when we were old enough just to sit properly, we had a bakery in the bottom floor, and the old pastry chef who was with my dad for probably like around 50 years, he would just make a 40 kg batch of dough.
Nice.
And me and my brother would sit there and we would make all the almond cookies, all the fortune cookies, and that's what we would serve to the guests. And by sitting in the bakery and working, essentially, that was keeping us safe and in a kind of safe-ish kind of environment, even though it was a hot kitchen. But that was our childcare.
Wow. So, and how was that for you? And I mean, did you enjoy it? Was it work, or did you not think about anything? Was it fun as a kid?
It was fun because it was presented in a manner that we were making cookies and baking and we're chipping in, helping the family. And so there was a sense of responsibility because I could already see my brother helping. I could see my sister already helping because she was slightly older. So she was already helping at the cash. My mother was working every day, 7 days a week. My father was working 7 days a week. But our entire family was employed. So my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my grandmother, everybody was in the restaurant. So it was kind of an honor to be kind of put into place where I could chip in and kind of do my kind of share, even though I was only 4.
But so where was that in the world when you were growing up?
That was in Toronto. That was my father's, I believe, his 4th restaurant at that time.
Wow. So you obviously come from your bloodline is essentially restaurant.
Yeah.
Right? So when growing up, so when you were, let's say, a little bit older, sort of teenage onwards, were you still very much involved, or were you trying to do your own thing?
So it was funny because I think my dad always had this master plan, and as kind of immigrant families, the parents always overwork themselves and try to push to set up their kids for a better future.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the dream, right? But even though that was the dream for us to be professionals, as they deemed, whether it be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, etc., we still had to do our part in the restaurant.
Right.
So from the childhood era of baking cookies and doing stuff in the bakery, as essentially we got stronger or bigger, then our roles changed. So my brother was always bigger and taller, so he moved on quickly to dumplings, and he would be pressing the skins for the chefs to roll, and I would help clean up the empty dim sum baskets and put the papers in.
Yeah.
But by the time I was a teenager, I had progressed from that to the front of the house, which again was a diabolical plan that my father had because he would make us start from the bottom up. So as soon as I was big enough, then I became a busboy. As soon as I became more mature, then from a busboy, I became a waiter. From a waiter, I became a captain. From a captain, I became a bartender. And then finally, I got my chance to kind of manage the dining room. And then only after I successfully could run the front of the house, then he plopped me back into the kitchen to wash dishes.
Wow.
And from there
What
would
a
go,
plan.
yeah, from there would dishes to peeling vegetables to cleaning meat, cleaning fish, and then I would start cooking finally. So it was
Wow.
a whole journey.
So how old were you by the time you got to sort of go in the kitchen?
I was probably around, I mean, I started washing dishes when I was 12.
Yeah.
By the time I was actually cooking and cleaning vegetables, it was probably around 13, 14
Okay. So then through high school,
through high school.
you were in the kitchen as well?
Every day.
So then after you graduated, did you go straight into culinary school or did you want to do something completely different?
So I was part of that immigrant dream. I was the one who was pursuing medical. So from there, it was college, it was biology, studying that, and then prepping for med school, and pursuing that whole dream of having a doctor in the family.
But you were still working in the
Still
restaurant?
cooking every day.
Okay.
Every day it never ended. Even from the earliest age, it was wake up, go to school, 3:30, get picked up, go straight to the restaurant, 30 minutes of time to do homework, to have dinner, and then your shift would start, whether it be washing dishes, whether it be in the kitchen, wherever it may be. And when the rush was over, straight home, pass out, do it all over again.
Wow. And that's quite an amazing I feel, it's quite an amazing work ethic that your parents obviously gave your family, and but also the sense of community that you're all doing it together, I think is also like really nice.
Yeah, it was bred into us.
Yeah, which is, I think it's beautiful, really. So let me ask you then. So during the time that you were in med school and doing all that I think it's quite, it's phenomenal. I think that you're doing that job and at the same time from a linear perspective you're working. What you must have been did it ever in your mind occur that you wanted to be in hospitality full time, or was the plan for you, I'm going to work with my family and then I'm going to graduate and I'm going to go straight into medicine?
So I think the journey towards medicine was to fulfill their dream. Whereas I think deep down I had already known that somehow, some way, that my true love and my true passion would always going back to cooking. And it took some time because while I was attending classes, it was quite easy. I didn't find much difficulty in completing the daily tasks and projects and essays, and just it was very mundane to me. And the only time I was happy was that at night after class when I went back to the restaurant to help out and chip in. So I took that leap of faith and sat my parents down and was like, I think I'm going to drop out.
Okay, so let's stop there. Before you had that conversation, how many months or years had you already been into med school?
It was first year.
Okay, so you finished the first year?
Almost.
Or it was within?
Within.
Okay, so then you had to have the big chat.
The big chat.
And, okay, how did your parents take it?
They were furious at first, which is understandable because they're like, oh, we work so hard to provide you with this.
Right.
And you want to give it up and you want to go back to this. And I was explaining to them, I could do it. But would I be happy in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years?
Wow.
And what would the point of that be? Would it be accomplishing the task just because I set out to do it? Or would it make me happy in life? And it took some time, but eventually my parents sat me down and their only conversation was, you need to look at us. Look at what our relationship is. My father straight up just said, look at our relationship. What do you remember from your childhood? And I was like, with you? Nothing. He's like, every day, your soccer practice, your piano practice, your homework, was I there? And I was like, no. Good point. He's like, you need to understand that you will not have time and it will be very difficult for you to prioritize your family.
Right.
And I was like, that's a great point. And then he said, the next point, if you're lucky enough to find a partner who understands this wild world of hospitality, then you may find a partner who will accompany you on this journey. He's like, look at your mother. Your mother gave up her entire career to help me make my restaurant succeed. And I was like, At that point, I was single, so I was like, meh.
So how old were you when you had that conversation?
22.
But had you already known that you'd have to make time sacrifices whilst growing up, being in the restaurant, going through college? Did you already have that instilled in you?
You kind of know because you start to notice things. And this is his last point was like, keep this in mind. Every holiday, every occasion, every birthday, any fun time in the world, your friends will be partying, you'll be cooking. And it kind of hit home because I realized every one of our birthdays, every Christmas, every New Year's, every Chinese, every single major holiday occasion, we would always have to celebrate week or weeks afterwards, if we had a chance to celebrate at all.
Right.
And it kind of hit home because I was like, I need to understand that your life, this is your life. There's no halfway. There's no part-time being in this industry. It's either all or it's nothing.
So after all of that, you had the conversation, the parents were, but it's good that your dad told you this is what it's going to be like. I think that's really, I mean, it's amazing that he was so honest with you to sort of make sure that you're in. So did you want to sort of go into a pro kitchen straight away, or did you want to also go to culinary school?
So we were very lucky because Phoenix in Chicago turned into almost an industry hangout. So it was where all the chefs came to eat. It was where everyone in the industry would come on their day off. And I got a lot of opportunities to interact with essentially the biggest, baddest chefs from all over Chicago. And my father suggested is like, if you want to get a taste of it, why don't you go try working in their kitchens to make sure that this is something you want to do? Because you only know my kitchens. You don't know what's out there. So anytime a chef came in, I'd just be like, hey, can I like just drop in and do a shift or do a couple shifts or do a week? And I kind of just started plugging away throughout the city. Okay. Every chef that walked in, I would just be like, hey, chef, do you mind if I come stage for a day, a week, whatever they allowed me to do, just so I can get a taste of what a kitchen outside of the traditional Chinese kitchen felt like.
So after doing those certain stages, which kitchen did you eventually land in full time?
Nowhere. So from there, I went to culinary school.
Okay. So you thought, this is what I want to do. You really thought that was it. Okay.
Because one of the, actually a bunch of the instructors from the culinary school in Chicago are regulars as well. So after the stages, that's when I had the conversation with one instructor saying, what are the chances I can get into the school? And because they see me cook, they've tasted my food, they've seen me work, they're like, I'll talk to the dean, let's make this happen.
Okay.
And we made it happen.
So then that was how long? 2 years, 3 years?
So I did a 2-year associates first, but because of my visa situation, at that time I was still working towards getting a green card. Mm-hmm. I extended my 2-year associates, which I finished and completed and got that degree, and I did an additional 2 years for a bachelor's degree as well.
Wow. So 4 years total. We're not counting med school, but 4 years total with culinary. During that time, still the fire was there. You wanted to be in, you wanted to push. There was never a doubt that you wanted to go back to med school?
No, not at all. Never looked back.
So then what was your first job that you landed after culinary school?
So I turned into kind of the school's ambassador almost, because I think of what my father instilled into me. Any chance there was an event, a special program, anything that happened in the school, I was the first to jump at it. And because I outworked everybody else, the dean essentially took favor to me. And anytime the dean wanted food, anytime he was hungry, anytime he wanted something done, I would leap at it. Whether it be cleaning the kitchen, whether it be scrubbing the floors, every single opportunity that happened, I jumped at. And that kind of led me into my first opportunity, which was an event from one of his friends, was a Belgian chef. He did an event at the school. And after the event, the chef was like, one job? And I probably should have done some research, but I kind of just said, sure, and just blindly stumbled into it. And leap of faith, found myself in this tiny bed and breakfast in a place called Dino in Belgium, and it changed my world.
Oh, so from the US you went to Belgium?
Yeah.
Not speaking a word of...
So I remember a little bit of my French,
my
Canadian French, if you can call that real French, but it was in a town where they only spoke French or Dutch.
Wow. So what was your job in that place?
Looking back, it was probably one of the harder things that I've done in my life. But I don't think anywhere else, at least in North America, I would have been able to learn what I learned there. So the routine there was that 7 a.m., we wake up. It was me, the other chef, and the sous chef. We would go to the farm, pick up all the vegetables, pick up all the herbs, make sure everything was prepped by the time chef woke up. Okay?
What time did he wake up?
Depending on how much he drank the night before, it could have been anywhere from 7:45 to 8 to 8:15, and no one knew.
Jeez, man.
But he would stroll down, and then the moment he strolled down, we would sit, and that's when we'd have breakfast. Once we finished breakfast, that's when prep would start. So we would prep and get ready for lunch service. And the interesting thing was that we didn't have a dishwasher. So every single thing that the restaurant used, every piece of equipment the restaurant used, other than me doing my work as a cook, I would have to clean as well. So we would get ready for lunch service, and then we would fire lunch service, and I would have to wash all the dishes. But the cool part was that around 10:30, the hunters would come, and whatever they caught, that would be our proteins. So some days it was duck, some days it was pheasant, sometimes it was boar. It could be anything. And I would sit in the garage and I would clean them. I learned how to like clean buckshot out of these live animals, how to defeather them and how to age them, and we would cycle through. We also had a fish pond. So every order of fish that we got in, I would have to run outside with my little net and catch the fish, bring it back inside, butcher, clean it, cook it to order.
Wow, what a schooling! Because culinary school would never taught you that.
Or
Especially
restaurants.
all restaurants and the butchery and all of that sort of stuff and the discipline. So that was 5 days a week or 6 days a
7
week?
days a week.
7 days a week.
Yeah.
God, and how long for? Were you there?
But just over a year.
So you must have learned a huge deal, apart from the language.
Unpaid.
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 Why was it unpaid?
It's kind of that old cut of like cloth, right? Like back then, when you didn't get paid to work. You got your payment, your salary was learning.
So and essentially, of course, they gave you like bed, breakfast, food, all of that
room and
kind of
board.
stuff, right? Room and board. Wow. So then, when did you go? Did you go straight back to the US after that to the family, or did you carry on in Europe?
So at the end of it, the chef's wife, who was Mama, she took care of us, and she gave me an envelope full of cash at the end of it, and she was like, "Thank you for your work. I hope this is something like that you can enjoy." So I just took that money and just jumped on the train and just bounced around until my money was gone. Hopped around all around Europe, and then that was time to go home.
So, back once you were home, what was the next step?
So that was a tough time because I was trying to figure out my whole visa situation. And that's when I had the opportunity to open a restaurant. And it was interesting because you're coming straight out of Century Culinary School, fresh off the block. But I was fortunate enough that I had some of my closest dear friends who were also my students when I was TAing at the culinary school as well. And we leapt at the chance. So we opened this restaurant, pretty much learning on the fly, but it was my first chef job, like my first head chef job. So we opened this tiny little Asian restaurant in the southern suburbs of Chicago. And I was fortunate enough because my best friends believed in me, they all left insane kitchens to come work for me. And the five of us rented this tiny little apartment and tried to open a restaurant. And it was probably some of the most fun that we've had as baby chefs. But it was a wild journey. We won for best new restaurant, and we obviously partied quite a bit because living in the same house, we would wake up in the morning, go to the markets, come back, prep, smash service, head straight back to the city, drink until 5, 6 a.m. in the morning, and do it all over again.
Personal question for you. Being the head chef, working with your friends, did you find it difficult to differentiate between being a chef leader and their friend?
It would have been a very different situation if I had to hire other chefs who I didn't know. But because we had such a strong bond, they're still my best friends now. They really respected me and my word. They also knew that I was holding them to a much higher standard than we've ever done. And we managed to pull it together. And it was tough. It was very tough. But these are probably the best chefs that I've ever worked with because they all came from this insane pedigree of working in Michelin star restaurants, who gave up that just to come help me for this 1 year. Sadly, the owners and I, the whole team, we had different perspectives of how the business should be run. So we all left, and it's quite beautiful because that crew that worked with me went on to work at Michelin star restaurants, 3 Michelin star restaurants, and got their own stars as well. So and we're still best friends. They
Sounds
were
quyou cool though.
very cool.
Yeah,
Very,
but
very
I mean, I can imagine at times it must have been a bit sort of conflicting that you're their best mate friend, you know, and then but you're also the head chef and you're trying to sort of run this restaurant. So when someone's making mistakes, it's how to manage that.
It was very difficult because I had to learn very early on how to manage people.
How was your management style then?
Still,
Because
Quite-
you were fresh, right?
quite embarrassingly, and I'm quite ashamed of it, because of the way I was taught. It was that very old school kitchen where there was a lot of yelling.
Yeah.
There was a lot of swearing. But with these guys in particular, I knew that me making them feel like I was disappointed was far more effective than me shouting, screaming, yelling at them.
Okay.
So it was always that you gave them that parent, like mom
Yes.
look, just like,
Yes.
you know, and then that lit a fire into them, and
Okay.
they would just turn back on. So that was far more effective back then.
So then what I want to do is I want to sort of fast forward to sort of 2012 when you first went to India. So obviously you'd seen Europe, you knew what it was about. Obviously US, you had your own place. What was the catalyst for you to go to another continent? Because it's very different. India, super different. Not just in culture, food, I mean everything.
So this was when I was back in Toronto. Me and a couple of my best friends were trying to open a restaurant. We secured a location. I designed the menu. I already started procuring equipment. And when we were supposed to sign the lease, we got into a disagreement with the landlord. So we dropped the restaurant. And I was sitting in my room, not doing anything. Got a random phone call at 3 a.m. This was 2 days after we dropped the restaurant. Got a random phone call at 3 a.m. And it was one of my old students who was from Bombay. And he calls me up. He's like, hey, bro, like we opened this cool restaurant with a young, ambitious owner who wants to kill it and do really crazy stuff. They had hired the Botaggio brothers, who were just fresh off their wins from Top Chef. Death & Co., who was #1 in the world for their bar program. Thomas Shoes, one of the elite designers around the world, designed this beautiful restaurant. It's an amazing place, but something wasn't clicking and it wasn't working. So he's like, would you like to come out and help us out? And I was like, no, not at all. At that point in time, I had no idea what was happening in India, nor did I even want to go to India at that point. At that point, I was just trying to figure out life because I had just dropped my restaurant. But he started to explain to me that Bombay, especially around 2012, was one of the most exciting F&B markets at the time because of the emerging middle class. And this is when social media was just starting. He said there's just this vast population who are just thirsting for good food, good drink, good experience, and it's a really cool market for you to kind of enter and try. So as he pitches to me, I'm thinking, okay, I'm not doing this restaurant. I don't have anything on plan. I'm like, okay, you kind of got my interest here. I was like, give me a shout tomorrow and let's chat more. Go back to bed. A couple hours later, my phone rings again. And I answer, and he's like, yo. The owner is on the phone with you. He wants to talk to you.
Jesus.
And I was like, wait, I'm in my underwear. It's 5 a.m. And I was like, you really want to talk now? He's like, yeah, he's really excited to talk to you. Let's talk. I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. So we chatted quite a bit, and yeah, we made it happen. And it was a leap of faith, a 6-month contract, which kind of turned into 10 years.
Because that's a huge leap of faith.
Yeah.
So during that time, what were the types of concepts and restaurants that you were managing?
So the first one was, it started off as a extreme fine dining, where we were flying in ingredients and doing all sorts of wild things like 26 component dishes. And
Right.
Because that's when like El Bulli was like on fire and Kiki was there. Like everyone was like trying to do like the world's best was like just like pushing these crazy great restaurants, but it wasn't working because the market wasn't ready for that sort of restaurant. So I flipped it around. And from that, I turned it into almost fun dining, where it was still the same standards, but just simpler, very approachable food, 5-6 ingredients per dish, and exploded. It turned into the hotspot.
But the price point also, you have to be quite sensitive because the price point in India is...
Especially at that time.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely different to Europe.
Mm-hmm.
UK, US, so you have to be very sensitive
So we
towards
changed
that,
all
right?
of that.
Okay.
And then from there, I did a seafood restaurant. I did a street food restaurant. Launched a burger brand. Started an Asian restaurant. But it was very blessed that run because I built a lot of great brands and was able to establish myself and doing different things.
So then, the other thing I sort of wanted to sort of analyze and have a chat with you about is your management style again would have had to adapt to the culture, to the language per se. How was that for you in the beginning?
It was very tough learning. And again, looking back, it was probably some of the worst management and leadership that I've ever done, because I was taught you make mistakes, you get yelled at. I was taught if your temps are off, your sauce is wrong, anything that you do wrong, you get yelled at.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually emulated that. So the amount of screaming and shouting, it's embarrassing because I was known as the angry chef. Everybody in town, because I would storm around the dining room with like my eyebrows furrowed and just like looking to yell at someone, and it was not the way to do it looking back. And it took all the way till now, till this whole journey, till I reached Dubai, till I became a father, for me to really understand it's useless. Me shouting, screaming, kicking, swearing, throwing, all of that's useless, because you'll never ever be able to teach someone, even though that's the way I was taught. What happens during a service when something goes wrong? You yell, you kick, you scream, you shout, you throw plates, you break plates. The person who you're doing that to, they break down, they lose concentration, and nothing gets fixed. At the end of the day, the guest is not getting a better experience. So what does me destroying someone do for me serving this guest? Whereas now, if I take the time to prepare my team, to arm them with the knowledge, arm them with the skills, teach them to be prepared for it, even if there is a mistake, if I show them how to fix it and do it with them, that I can get to my guest immediately. And it'll happen less and less and less.
So then let's say, I mean, you started in 2012. You had, the usual sort of teachings of what they would do in the US or Europe, whatever. Let's say aggressive.
Very aggressive.
When you went to India, and obviously there is a clear language barrier, and also there's an accent barrier, right? That must have not only frustrated you, but have also frustrated everybody else, right? Because you've got your message and things to say. Commis, sous chefs, CDPs, restaurant managers per se would have also had things that they wanted to say to you, but maybe not communicated them in the right way to get the message. It must have been quite like so much stuff going on, and you're away from home, but your management style from, let's say, 2012 to, let's say, 2020, did it change? It must have changed some time through the years.
It was already starting to evolve. I had already noticed what was working and what wasn't working.
Right.
And because I was running multiple outlets with multiple teams, I learned that, first off, everyone's personality was completely different.
Yes.
So whether it's someone needs a little bit more coddling, whether someone needs to be a little bit more soft, some people just need that formal, strict guideline. They need those boundaries. Learning to be able to gauge everyone for their individual kind of personality type, that helped me the most. Because when I was back in Canada again, managing a hotel, there I quickly learned that I couldn't just shout and scream because we had unions. We had reps in the kitchen. So the moment I raised my voice, I would get a call from HR and be like, hey, come down to the office.
Oh my
and
God.
that turned into a routine thing. It would be a running joke because every week I would end up in HR and the lady is like, what did you do now? And I'd just be like, I don't know, cook. Because it didn't compute that I couldn't do it. But I had to learn how to adapt and learn very quickly in order to be successful.
You're right, because also there's so many different types of kitchens. But again, there are, I think still to this day, there are two types of schools. You've got the old school, which is kind of the screamy, shouty. And then you've got this sort of new school, that you are sort of more mentor-esque, so to speak. But which one is, some people would argue, which one is more effective to get the job done. But I agree with nowadays, especially with mental health and all of those things, it's how do you keep mentoring and teaching people and making sure that they're doing the correct job. At the same time, the guest needs to get the right taste, food, so on and so forth. So it's a lot to manage. But then after 10 years, a serious 10 years stint, Jun's award-winning restaurant here in Dubai. Can you please tell me the inception? How did that come about, this project?
So, this was after I returned to Las Vegas, and Neha Anand, my partner, reached out to me and said, would you be interested in coming to Dubai? I had previously scouted Dubai with some other companies, so I knew what was happening here. And it was always very high on my list of potential places to open a restaurant, because I understood that in Dubai, it is packed with the most amazing restaurants, the most amazing chefs. But what Dubai has done so beautifully is that if you have quality, if you have originality, it is a place where you can succeed. And that always made me want to come here. So when we finally started just trying to come up with the idea for Jun's, I already had known that there's so many great Asian restaurants here who are serving Asian flavors. There's so many great chefs cooking these Asian cuisines and flavors. So what I wanted to create was something different, so that I could stand out. Why be one amongst the rest? Yeah. And here I get to cook the latest version of Kelvin's food. So what I saw was I wanted to capture those Asian flavors without following those same formats that a lot of other people were doing. And this is how it became very third culture cooking, which is me. It's my history. It's my journey. It's my father's Chinese, Hong Kong, Cantonese cuisine. It's my mother's Singaporean background. It's me growing up in Toronto, me growing up in Chicago, and experiencing every single ethnic flavor that was around us, so that it all became part of my flavor profile, my palate, my food memories, all the way through North America, Belgium, India, and now to Dubai.
So if you were to take me through the customer journey and the concept for anyone who's never been, how would you describe the food? How would you describe the dining experience?
So we try to give you the experience that you would at any of these fine dining establishments across the world, let alone Dubai, but in a very fun, casual sort of environment. I did not want to be the destination spot. I didn't want to be the occasion spot. I wanted to be the place where you're hungry, you think of me. You're on a date night, you think of me. You have girls' night, you think of me. If you want to celebrate an occasion, I still can give you the Wagyu, the truffles, the caviar. But I want to be your go-to spot because you know that it's going to be a fun experience for great food, great drink. Now, for the food, I would always want new clients who have never come before, new guests, new friends, new family, come with an open mind, because it's going to be flavors and things that you taste that you haven't had. But it'll also kind of hit your flavor memories and your nostalgia, because you will be able to still have those same Asian flavors, just in a very different format. And that's the goal of the restaurant. When I create dishes for the menu, every single dish is tied to a memory. Every single dish is tied to something that I've tasted or something that I've experienced. And the interesting part is that I really believe that when you come down to everyone on this planet, we're tied together by food. Somewhere, somehow, there's some connect with every dish, every flavor that we've done. Doesn't matter if we're Canadian, if you're American, if you're Emirati, if you're from Dubai, or from somewhere else in the world. This is a common denominator between humans. It's our food.
I totally agree. Because it's anything and everything to do with life is memories, any occasion, whatever it is, everything is tied to food. Now, talking about occasions, Kelvin, the one thing which I really love that you do also and celebrate and make are the cakes. I want to talk about the cakes because these cakes are not just any types of cakes. Describe these beautiful cakes to me.
Okay, so let's put it out there very clear to everybody. I'm not a pastry chef. I don't have the temperament. I don't have the mentality. I do dabble in pastries and desserts because I enjoy them. I love desserts. This was when my wife was pregnant still. And she called in the middle of service on a Friday night. Didn't answer because I was busy. Calls again, didn't answer. Calls again, I'm like, she's pregnant. I need to call. I need to answer. So I like lean over and answer, hey, babe, what's up? And she's like, hey. I was like, hey, babe. And she's like, when's the last time you made a cake? And I was like, I don't know, like culinary school? And she's like, I think you should make cake. I was like, okay. Whatever she asks, I'm going to try it. So I stayed back after service. At the end of the night, everyone's gone home, and I started baking. And I made the first cake. And the idea behind the cake was the anti-cake. Because it suits me. Cakes that, for predominantly, that you see, they're perfect. They're layers and perfect frosting and, like even this and that. But my issue with a lot of cakes was always that every time I get a slice of cake, by the second or third bite, I'm bored of it. And generally, except for the great cakes out there, they're always too sweet, very boring. So I wanted to do a cake where I would create different textures and layers and very complex combinations so that every bite was fun and that every bite would keep you interested. But it was at a level of sugar and sweetness that was more balanced so that you could actually have a slice of cake. And that's why we've kept them naked. So I've always kept the cakes naked because I wanted people to be able to see it. There's no hiding. You buy a cake that's frosted with butters, cream, and fondant and whatever, you can't see anything. and they get to hide a lot of their flaws. So what I did was I wanted to showcase everything that we put into it. And the cakes, there's a basic format for the cakes. So how I broke it down was there's a sponge, there's sauces, there's garnishes, and there's textures. And that's how I combine them and design it so that every bite will give you some of each.
Every bite?
Yeah.
Wow. And they're also like super cool different flavors, right?
Yeah, we try to go out of our way to create fun flavors.
And do you get a lot of requests now?
We do. We've been very blessed. Again, people like the cakes, so we sell a lot of these things.
So look, now you've been June's for how long?
So June's has been open for just over a year now, a year and a bit.
Over that year, you've managed to get in the Michelin Guide. You're in Gault and Millau, top 50 best. Was that ever a vision for you originally?
No. I think if you ask young Chef Kelvin, it was always a goal. Everyone wants to be on World's Best. Everybody wants to get their star. And it was something that you strove for. And I think just as time has passed, for me, what would I consider a success in a restaurant? Some of my best friends, like Chef Dan Bark, who was one of my closest friends, he has his star now in Bangkok. Chef Matt in LA, he went on to work for a Michelin star place, etc. For them, this was always their life dream, and they set their career in that path. I knew, even though I've worked in those places, I knew that I think my father's imprint was very deep set into how I see food and how I see that relationship with people who enter my restaurant. For me, a success is not the awards. For me, a success is not being in media and being this fame and famous. All that goes away. For me, a success is being able to feed people what I want to feed them and them enjoying it. And that's it. And I've reached a point in my life and career where that's my only goal now. If I disappeared from everything and I had a full restaurant only cooking food that I could cook, that I wanted to cook, and people enjoyed it, for me, that is a success.
Because a lot of chefs would say completely the opposite answer, Kelvin. They would say, no, it wasn't that, but we want to progress, we want to push, so on and so forth. But at the same time, I do completely agree with you. The rest goes and it fades very quickly. So, and chefs who have been in the game for some time, their answer copies exactly what you've just said. Not only that, work-life balance. Because they, in the beginning, when they were much younger, they dedicated their soul into the hospitality industry. But now as they get older, they've done, the 20-hour days, whatever. They have families and they want to spend those days, But do you see Jun's progressing food-wise?
Yeah. Because it was such a different sort of concept than everyone else in this landscape, it took some time for people to understand what we were doing. So I kept things very approachable. Even things on like our tasting menu, which we've launched. You can come in on a daily basis to get a slice of what we do at Jun's. And now that people really understand what we're doing and why we're here, this is when now I can turn it up. So this new menu that's coming up, this new tasting menu that's coming up, I'm going to push my team and myself, again, harder so that we can really up our techniques and complexity in the dishes. And I think that's what people want. And I'm able to create new, more fun stuff now that people understand what we're doing. It doesn't mean I'm doing, I'm not going to put you on this 4-hour journey again, but it means that I can really push harder in doing really, really fun stuff that I've wanted to always do throughout my career now.
Because also the nice thing is that you're also in timeout market. Tell me about the concept and the food you're doing there. How different is it?
So it's very different. Little Jun's in Timeout Market is the younger sibling. It's the fun version, the wild version. So that's where it's more approachable. It's things that you would find almost in the like food courts across Asia, and that's the idea where I'll capture those more Asian street foodie type stuff, and then you can come in and just grab a drink and then have some plates at Little Jun's.
And then, because it's quite meteoric what you've done here in such a short space of time within a year. You've got those beautiful accolades. The restaurant's busy. You're not only cooking within Dubai, but you're also cooking internationally. Is there a point where you would think, or yourself and your business partner would think to sort of have Jun's somewhere else, or would it only be for Dubai and you'd make another concept somewhere else?
So we're already working on pushing the next couple projects. I feel like Jun's is something that could be replicated in multiple spots because it's not a per se like a me-driven concept. It's not a fine dining experience for 20 people where they would want me for everything. Because the way I've designed the menus, because of the way we've instilled the training to the teams, every single person who comes in gets the same experience. Every single member on the floor knows every story, the history of every dish, and how I've created it and why I've created it. So, for example, if we're blessed enough to open a place in London or back in New York or wherever, that same dish served to you sitting in a different country, different continent, you should have that same experience, that same story, and be able to experience Chef Kelvin's memory.
And that's what you're aiming to do.
Let's see. If we're lucky enough, I think that's what's going to happen. Although I am working on some other things now as well. But if we're lucky enough, I think that could happen.
Because of you know what's going on in the scene here. There's a lot of brands or restaurateurs or chefs who are homegrown per se, and they're going out internationally. Mm-hmm. Because the world seems to be within the Middle East. Especially from a dining perspective, it's exploded, especially in the last 5 years. But then the other thing that I wanted to sort of touch upon is a word that we never, I would say, ever really use in especially kitchens and restaurants. Wellness. To you, personally and professionally, why is wellness so important in our industry?
So this is where, it ties it all back together. Because you've asked me about my management, you've asked me about the way I perceive my balance. So I went from that angry chef who smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drank half a bottle of whiskey a day, and a lot more on weekends, who shouted, kicked, screamed, to now I pretty much don't drink anymore. I've quit smoking. I worked out for the first time in my life after I met my wife. And I noticed that the healthier and stronger I became, the better I was able to work.
Right.
And one thing I'm not sure if people have seen, especially on my Instagram and stuff, they might have seen it. Instead of yelling and shouting now, we do push-ups, we do burpees, we do planks. So when someone makes a mistake, and this goes for everyone,
I
because
love that.
you can catch it in middle of service. If you see me drop to the floor, it's because I've made a mistake. So the middle of service, if you see me just like take my apron off and fall on the floor and start doing push-ups, it's because I messed up. And it goes across the board. Every single person in the kitchen does it, and in the front. They just don't do it during service.
Right.
I can do mine during service. They cannot.
Right. Okay.
But if I were, because I noticed that if I were to have to yell and shout at 100 people in a day, either someone would die or I would die. My heart would burst.
Well, especially with the stress, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, you know.
So instead, how about we make a mistake and you just do 20 push-ups? You make another mistake and do 50 push-ups. You make a mistake, do 100 push-ups. Right? And there was a kid who started off as a dishwasher who turned out to be a pastry chef in another company. This kid was a scrawny 110-pound kid, soaking wet when he first started. By the end of that, he was with me for 8 years? By the end of it, this kid was ripped. Because he did hundreds of push-ups every day.
Because he made so many mistakes.
So many mistakes.
But at least he learned.
He learned, he's strong, and he's an amazing chef now.
Wow. So do you think that's something that all kitchens should take on?
I feel like it's a great way to do it because it turns into a game, especially if I'm willing to do it. The moment I drop and do it, then everyone knows it's real.
Yeah.
You know? And I have no problem doing it. If I make a mistake, I'm happy to admit it.
So I think we should organize like a push-up competition between the chefs because they need to start training for it now. But but joking aside, I think it's a great way, as you said, to motivate someone and to give somebody a lesson, but in a much different perspective than, you know, because you're going to get through to them. So it's really important. But what about your own personal? I mean, as you said before, growing up, you were working 7 days a week with the family, so on and so forth. Now you have a partner, you're a father. How do you instill that into your family, and what about your family life? Because you must cherish that a lot.
So 2 things. One, none of this would be possible without my wife. Andrea's a ninja. Everything that I have done since I've met her, everything that I've accomplished, everything that I've succeeded in, everything that I've failed in and I've come back from is all her. She has given up the majority of her life and her free space, everything, her career, put everything on hold so that I could focus on my career and she could help me build that. And it transcends into our family as well. My son is a happy, healthy child only because of her. Because she's been able to support me enough where I can come in and be the fun dad, the fun parent, when I've allowed myself to do it. Now, I advocate for this work-life balance. I advocate for this mental health. I advocate for this physical healthness and wellness and being. Do I practice it myself? Taking a serious look at it, I need to be better at it. And I think we all do. And it's discipline. And it's something that I've always lacked outside of work. And I think that's inherent in most of our industry because you're so disciplined at work. Your station is spotless. Your cuts are spotless. Your temperatures are like flawless. So I think because of that intensity within our workspace, the moment we leave, it's very hard for most of us. I have some friends who are amazing at it. But in order to maintain that discipline outside of that workspace as well, for most of us, it's very difficult. And I am one of the biggest culprits of that.
But I think it's good that you obviously recognize that within yourself, and you touched upon something which I think we all should sort of understand is the discipline. That word, because discipline beats motivation 2,000,000%. I'm motivated to read a book, but it's about the discipline.
Yeah.
You know, so I hope that now more chefs, as you said, are sort of taking the time to at least trying to have that work-life balance, whether it's with their own family or within their own personal space. But I think that's something that needs to be much more highly discussed, open and honestly, instead of it being some sort of taboo subject that, no, I don't have mental health. No, how dare you? We're all mental.
Yeah.
Very straightforward. More ways than one, right? But that thing that you're saying about family support, I believe is huge. It's really something that should be instilled and again, discussed with your mentors at work, even through culinary school. Time management, I think, is something that we never discuss in, I don't know if it was discussed in college, but during my time in college, that was never discussed.
No, never.
Time management even on a section, no. So, but why not? So, but do you find it sort of going back to running the business, because you're not just the chef, you're a business partner in that business. What are the pressures that you face running a business?
I mean, I've been very blessed with my partner, Neha. She unwaveringly believes in me and allows me to have the freedom to create and do pretty much whatever I want, especially when it comes to the food and the drink. But, you have those natural hurdles, which a lot of times people who aren't in the industry, they don't understand. You have an entire staff who rely on you to have a stable, successful business so that they can provide for their families.
Yep.
You have vendors, you have the P&Ls, which you need to look at a daily basis. And this is the non-glamorous side of it. This is the adulting side of it. Cooking is easy. Cooking is the easiest part of our job. It's managing people, I believe, is the hardest part. Then managing these numbers is the next hardest part, which is something that most chefs don't get the opportunity to learn. And that's probably our weakest part of our industry, is that we are not armed to deal with this side of the business.
It's very true. Because you're right. Everything, again, when you say to younger Kelvin or whatever, in the beginning, everything is about the food and the passion and the fire, and it's the food. You don't know or care what a food cost is,
No.
or overheads and so on and so forth. But when you do get into it, it's just like, oh, geez, I wish I learned that when I was much younger. So I think that, again, is something that should be discussed open and honestly.
Fully.
With everyone, with any chef. Doesn't matter if it's McDonald's or high-end fine dining.
No.
The numbers and the numbers, and you must know.
You have to know.
And especially P&L sheets. In the beginning, I hated P&L sheets. I was just like, oh my god, the finance manager and the purchasing and it was just like, yeah, we hated each other. But my hate, and I say that hate, came from my insecurities of not understanding.
Fully.
Just like them, if I was to say, listen, can you cook for 1,000 people at a wedding buffet? It's the same kind of thing. So it's a bit of give and take. So then, once, you've been in the industry for some time now, but specifically within the Middle East, how do you see the future of F&B here?
This is the best, perfect landscape in the world right now. The leaders here, again, I think we've touched about this earlier, have created such a wondrous, beautiful environment where people like us who are doing interesting, amazing, beautiful things gives us this opportunity to succeed. And this region is only growing. A lot of the issues that you're seeing around the world, we don't have to worry about that here. And that allows us to focus on building these brands, building these restaurants, building these hotels, building these bars. And as the Middle East kind of goes through their evolution and their changes, that'll only give us better and better opportunities here.
Because you're right, the pedigree of management, of chefs, of leadership, all of it is so aligned. And, thank God and touch wood, we all work in harmony together and we understand each other. Not only that, we also understand each other's religions and celebrations and so on and so forth. So it's really thriving.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic, and real congratulations to you and the entire team for what you have achieved
Thank you.
here, because it's not easy to do in such a short space of time.
Yeah, we've had a very blessed run because we've, I think very early on, we've had the right, I like to describe them as ambassadors. I find that, especially in Dubai, it's not about these influencers or these food mafia and this whatever. What can make a place succeed, especially in Dubai, is forming these relationships with people who come into your restaurant who become your ambassadors. They spread the word, they spread the gospel, they spread the belief of the restaurant. And that's what works well here. And we were very lucky. We were very blessed to have a lot of the supporters who came through.
And that's the other thing is that I think also, I'm talking from personal experience. I don't know what you think. But you also, chefs themselves, they also celebrate you. And they're not, they really want to celebrate each other. So I think it's a really beautifully connected relationship that we all have. So then, Kelvin, now we've come to the quick fire questions. I hope you're ready. First of all, gym or meditation?
Gym, 100%.
Sweet or salty?
Ooh, it used to be sweet, then it went to salty, and now it's back to sweet.
Okay. Favorite ingredient?
Ooh, this is a great one. It's changed so many times over the years. Right now, I'm back on my acid kick. So anything sour, that's what I'm using.
All right. So then, spicy or pickled?
Again, it's a sign of age. It used to be spicy. I love spicy food. I used to eat chilies, breakfast, lunch, dinner. I used to eat them. Now, cannot eat them. So definitely pickle.
Who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes?
Ooh, great question.
And they don't need to be chefs.
Oh, even better question. Culinary heroes would have to be, one is my grandmother. She was my she was my grandfather's chef. And then she went on to become my father's chef at his first couple of restaurants. She is 104 now.
What a legend.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I still need to get all her recipes, which I'm very angry about because one of my aunts who has a restaurant in Toronto, you have the recipes and I need them.
What's her name?
This is Auntie Jean.
Auntie Jean. Come on.
So her for sure. There's also a chef, Dave Gunawan, who happens to be was one of my students in my TA time as well. But I went to work for him as a sous chef, and that was one of my biggest failures as a chef to date. I went into his kitchen thinking that I was going to be a badass and I was going to take over his kitchen, and every single cook chef in that kitchen ran circles around me, and I quit after I think my second week, and I was embarrassed. I was humbled, but instead of giving up, that was a sign to me saying, listen, it's a big world out there. There's a lot of chefs who are way better than you. You better focus and hone your craft. So I spent the next couple of years really deep diving and learning again. And it was thanks to him because he was like, listen, you just need to get better. So I still owe him a big thank you. And then the last one is, I hate to be so stereotypical, but it was probably my dad. He was a very difficult eater, but his style of training for me, every time I cooked for him, this is after I began culinary school and whatever, I left the school, he would never let me use any spices or any herbs when I cooked for him. Because he was like, if you get to cheat and cover up your cooking with these spices and whatnot, I can't tell if you're a better chef now. So whenever I cooked from, I would have to just use whatever natural proteins and or vegetables and try to extract flavor from it. So it was one of the hardest lessons that I had to
What
learn.
a phenomenal lesson, though.
Yeah.
You know, what a test.
Yeah.
What would you say are your top 3 cuisines right now for you?
To eat?
Yes.
It's always going to be Chinese first. I feel like Chinese cuisine is just so vast and it's just so complex and so undervalued. People don't realize that when you go to China, it's not what you've seen
The
as Chinese food.
history of the food
Yeah.
as well, and the cultures and the provinces. I mean,
Exactly.
oh my God.
Every region
Yeah.
is going to be so different, and it's so unexplored. So I don't think it's had its time yet. Where you're seeing these explosions of these other cultures who've had their time. Next would probably be Japanese. It's kind of me and my wife. We can literally have Japanese food every day, and it's also one of our favorite places in the world to go to. And lastly, right now, I want to say it's going to be Thai food. I'm on a binge of Thai food right now, which I've always loved. But again,
Super complex.
so complex because people often think it's just this sweet kind of whatever, but learning how to actually balance those flavors, very, very
Making
cool
those
stuff.
pastes are not easy by hand.
Yeah.
You know, so
A lot of work.
I agree. So then, what would you say has been the funniest kitchen incident that you've either witnessed or been involved in?
I'm gonna give you 2 because
Beautiful.
one, I'm actually ashamed of because I was a part of it. And looking back, I need to find this person. If I ever come across you, I don't know if I should mention your name or not. I'm not gonna mention your name, but I'm gonna find you. I made this person never cook again.
Right. Okay.
And it was very embarrassing because
Okay.
I destroyed this poor young chap who was a change of career person. He was like a big old construction worker, like 6'4", like solid muscle, and he thought he could cook. And he came in, he jumped on the grill station, and he said, "Chef, I got this. I don't need your lessons. I need you to teach me." So we started service, and he fell apart. He just fell apart. He just could not keep up, and I threw a steak at him in front of an entire room full of guests in an open kitchen, and it hit this guy in the face, and the kitchen stopped, and the dining room stopped, and I lost it, and I'm so embarrassed by it because looking back, this was the absolute worst thing I could have done to him, and I made him stand there while I ran his station throughout the entire service, and this bulk of a guy was just crying his eyes out, and I feel terrible, and it's something that I'm so embarrassed about. And please don't do this, chefs. Like, this is not what you do to guys. But I think the funniest was I had a catering event for 1,000 people, and we were late. We were rushing over, and we hit a speed bump, and we dropped the cake, and it fell apart. And
No.
in 30 minutes, we assembled a cake with our bare hands in the back of a car. But we managed to serve it, and no one noticed.
Oh my God.
But we made it happen in the back of a car with our hands. Yeah, we made a hand cake.
Hand cake. I like it. Everybody was hygienic and they cleaned their hands afterwards. Right. So then, 2 more questions for you. What would be your particular or best advice, let's say, for anyone who is wanting to become a professional chef?
First off, you have to make sure this is something you want to do. I think the onset of this is even when I was already halfway through becoming a chef. It's when Food Network kind of exploded. It's when social media was kind of over the place. Don't get caught up in the spotlight. Should be at least, our industry is not about being famous. We are here to feed, to provide a service. This is what we do. We feed people. And a lot of young chefs forget that. They don't remember that our sole job is to take care of people and to feed them. And they get caught up in the spotlight. So I would say, as a young chef or as an aspiring young chef, stay humble and keep your head down and you keep cooking. The second thing, I guess, would be this balance. People often forget that as a chef, we need to be able to cook for a very long time. So unless you're healthy, unless you're strong, you're not going to be able to cook in 10 years, in 20 years, and 30 years. And it's one thing that I'm trying to get back on now, because as soon as I got handover of this restaurant, before the restaurant even opened, I stopped working out. I stopped doing all the things that I needed to do. I stopped meditating. I stopped doing all this kind of stuff. And we just forget about it, right? Because you get so caught up in your day-to-day life. And I know that in order for me to be able to cook for at least another 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, who knows? I need to be healthy. And this goes healthy in body, healthy in mind, healthy in heart, right? So this is very important. And something that, again, as young chefs, we just forget about, you know? It's not a very fun life. So
True. I agree.
we get caught up in it.
What advice would you give to 16-year-old Kelvin Cheung?
Oh, gosh. This is a funny one because looking back, sometimes I'm like, bro, just finish school. You'd probably be healthier. You'd probably be making more money. Probably more stable. But it's been such a glorious ride. It's been such a fun, exciting ride. The only things I would say is be more disciplined, be more focused. And I think if I could instill that discipline into 16-year-old Kelvin, even 12-year-old Kelvin, I think I'd probably be a better chef. And I'm lucky that old Kelvin realizes that there's so many other better chefs out there that I need to constantly learn and better my craft in order to succeed. And I think that's the one thing that I would tell my young self and my old self, that we always need to do better. There's always a better way. There's always some way we can make everything a little bit easier, more efficient, and taste better.
Agreed.
Well, look, just to recap, Kelvin, we've gone through a huge amount. I mean, your first or favorite food memories, I love. I love that. The type of food growing up, the education. You had med school, which I think is really, really interesting. Belgium, and then going into Europe. And then, of course, that incredible journey you had in India, going through that entire time. And, of course, Jun's here in Dubai, the accolades, what you have achieved so far, all of the business acumen that you've discussed, the wellness thing, which I think is a really important point for everybody, not just for chefs. Of course, the pressures of running a business and, you know, being fortunate enough to have a partner, a business partner and a life partner who both believe wholly in everything that you do. And then the quick fire. And thank you very much for the advice for anyone wanting to become a chef, because that really resonates and it's true. It's super true. So I just want to say on behalf of the ChefJKP podcast, a massive thank you to you for what you're doing. Keep inspiring everyone, keep pushing, and really keep flying that flag. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.